Professor, what do you say, man?
You professored me right off the bat. I mean, you came hard on a Thursday. You professored me.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think sometimes you just got to throw it nasty up and in. You were leaning over the plate. I could feel it. I could have hit you with a big man. What do you say, big man? But you're my professor. And I think class is in session, Professor, because I think it's time to talk about some of the insanity in markets. And it's not just that valuations don't make sense, and it's not just that people are trying to invest in bankrupt companies. But I think we really do need to understand some of the mentality that's going on out there, because these are extraordinary times, and they are extraordinary times for the retail investor. There's been a lot of attention on our show. And I want to be really careful not to, this is not to be patronizing. This is definitely not to be pandering, and it's absolutely not arrogant, because if there's anything this market does is it humbles you. I have a lot of experience with managing a portfolio, and I have a lot of experience with leverage. And I can tell you that that's one of the things that's worth talking about, because it's one thing to lose what you can afford to lose. It's another thing to lose what you have no ability to lose, and no ability possibly to quantify what you could lose. This horrific, sad story about this Robinhood trader is something that I'd rather not spend a lot of time on. I want to acknowledge that, how awful of an event this is, and his family and his friends, and it's a catastrophe. And I'd rather talk about ways in which investors can look at their portfolio and really understand their value at risk.
Yeah, and yes, and that's a term that we use when we used to work at these different banks. It's what we call it VAR, but value at risk. Understand what you could potentially lose. And you mentioned leverage in sports.
I've heard you pronounce that word leverage. Is that leverage? Is that?
No, I was going to keep it. I was going to keep it straight for the sake of this, somewhat important. But I go
now. I look.
No.
I mean, thanks, dude.
I'll leave.
Appreciate that.
I mean, I do use, and I use when the word against. I'll say that from time to time.
When you get up in the morning, do you check your schedule?
I'm a straight schedule guy. The hard.
When we had to chat one time about whether you brought your lunch to school. When you brought your lunch to school in the brown bag, did your mom wrap it in aluminum foil?
Obviously, when I was commodities trading is 24/7. And so when the New York closes, Australia opens, and then Hong Kong and Europe and blah, blah, blah. And you get to know guys and gals from London. And the way they pronounce aluminium,
it's crazy, right?
Absolutely crazy. I needed to fly over there and throttle a few people.
When you were over in London, were you staying in your flat? And did you take the lift up to your flat and then order in some crisps?
And then you get into the whole Cockney English slang thing, the apples and pears, and it's the whole thing. I went to a soccer match at the pitch.
Football. It's not soccer.
At Wembley.
We play soccer. They play football.
And I saw, by the way, it was David Beckham's first
love
game.
Becks.
Yeah.
Love Becks.
If memory serves, it was a Charity Shields match. It was Newcastle versus Man U. And now
Man U. If I could bend him like Beckham, we'll leave it at that. But
we started this with this again. You said it's awful. There are no other words. I mean, a young man takes his life because he sees in his account a loss of somewhere around $750,000, $750,000. Now, the first question that comes to mind is, how in the world did those types of numbers happen? The second question is, how did whatever entity he was trading on, apparently Robinhood, allow him to enter into those trades? And the third question is, was there an offset that he didn't see? So he might not have been down that. Not that it matters, because the outcome is the same. But it goes back to a point that you've made a number of times. You have to understand the importance of leverage, what it does for you, but more importantly, what it can do against you. And I think this is ground zero for that. And it's problematic because with no sports out there, I think a lot of people that have historically gambled on the Giant game and then laid 6 points against the Eagles are now coming into a different arena where they equate it to be the same, but it's much, much different.
Well, and a sidebar to all this is DraftKings market cap is now almost $13 billion. And it'd be, 2 months ago, you could have reached into your pocket and bought the whole thing. So it also tells you that valuations for entities that are exposed to this, and that includes Robinhood. Robinhood, which has struggled at times in the valuation markets, private company, but there's some sense that their lack of profitability was, it was another one of those unicorns that really was not all that special. But you can see that, and whereas the casinos, and we've talked about LVS, really are not catching the bid because, in fact, right now they are structurally hampered, and it's going to be some time before they're at full capacity. So I just, in terms of leverage and in terms of options, one of the things that people do during times like this is they'll see a company and they'll say, hey, you know what? I'd be really happy to own that company down 30% from here and to get paid for it. And so in that sense, they're selling calls and they're actually basically selling the right of someone else to actually make me buy a stock significantly lower. And then the leverage attached to that, obviously, as the stock starts to approach either that exercise price or, God forbid, it hits that price and you're forced to exercise and actually take that stock, is one of the things that I like to refer to often as picking up pennies before the steamroller, and picking up nickels before the steamroller, because you're collecting a small premium, and the amount of open exposure you have is effectively unlimited. I mean, stocks can go to zero. And sometimes people will do that in these triple levered ETFs, which is part of what I'm talking about. This is at a time when, hey, you know what? I'd like to own the S&P down 30%. And you know what? There's a triple levered ETF where the option is not only 3 times, but because it's inherently much more levered, I'm actually paid more than 3 times on my premium. And without getting too wonky into this stuff, this is the caution. And I say that a little bit of leverage is a lot of cancer in a portfolio. You're not ever going to get taken out. And ultimately, everyone is a different type of investor. We often define this in different ways. There are traders, there are investors, there are tactical players, there are folks that are actually owning indices and or shorting indices and owning individual stocks. So they're trying to be somewhat hedged. And all of these things are different approaches, and they are all with risk, some with more risk than others. But ultimately, to speak to kind of the obvious square one, if you're a long-only investor without leverage, and you are a long-only player, and you see Home Depot go down 30% or 40% like it did in the early part of this drawdown, and say, this is an extraordinary company that I want to own for the next 4 or 5 years, this is an opportunity. And there are those opportunity stocks out there. The run in airlines, and we've talked about this on Fast Money, that ETF, the Jets ETF, saw, I don't know what the numbers are, but a multiple of 40 times their AUM increased in a 2-month period or something like that. Where making a call that airlines as a group are going to be not only profitable again, but will re-rate even just back to where they were or close to where they were is a trade that makes sense for me. But anyway, big man, I've been rambling on a little bit here. Sorry.
No, what you're talking about is important. We'll sort of end it on this. What you're talking about, selling naked puts, because in your mind, with Apple trading at 350, you'd be more than happy to own Apple at 325 if somebody would have put you the stock. And oh, by the way, if it doesn't get there, you've just earned the premium by selling that option. That's the mindset. And statistically, that works close to 80% of the time. Statistically, what they don't tell you is the 20% of the time it doesn't work is catastrophic. And everything you've just made, that 80%, you can give back in spades. So
you ever been there?
No, I mean, that's something, and it's something I rage against all the time with people. They tell me about these great, the trading strategies they have, and I talk it through them with them, and I hope it makes sense. And, we try to have fun every night, and we try to sort of give you the market and do it in a fun way, and we bring up all these crazy references. We're a little more dour tonight based on what happened, and to the extent that you folks are out there around the edges with this, just understand what you're doing, because you see the other side of this coin, the other side of the Dave Portnoy making 400%. is a young man killing himself because he thought he just lost $750,000.
Yeah, and let's not trivialize financial loss, and let's not trivialize the risk attached to these markets. And there is a deep end of the pool, and there is a shallow end of the pool in life and in markets. And I think there's been some sense that life's a day trade, and if that makes me, I'm sure I'm going to get added up, right, down, and sideways, but I feel very strongly that we've been doing this for 13 plus years. Our goals are really to set up a framework for investing. And investing means understanding the dynamics at work, which include not only bottom-up fundamentals and top-down dynamics, but market factors, technical factors. And these are the things that largely a lot of folks at home don't ever really get the same kind of access to. So with that, I'm going to head down to the pub and pull a couple pints before I then head home on the tube.
By the way, I used to stay at the Savoy, which is
Love
very
Savoy.
refined. Very refined. But
almost too refined for you, but anyway.
See you later.
See you, bro.